Welcome to episode 11 of the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I am your host, Matthew Benko. In this episode titled Bros for Life, I am proud and excited to introduce my brother Josh, whose military journey is nothing short of extraordinary. Josh joined the Air Force right after high school with plans to serve 4 years, but his experiences led him to a remarkable 26-year military career. He retired as a Chief Master Sergeant and is now a unit program coordinator for the U.S. Space Force. In our conversation, we'll explore how embracing change and facing new challenges shaped his path, the significance of communication and teamwork, and the mindset required for effective leadership. Get ready for an inspiring discussion filled with insights and reflection from Josh's incredible journey. This is the Acknowledge to Action podcast, where we embrace the journey. Hey, Josh. Thank you so much for being here. And I welcome you to the Acknowledge to Action podcast. And for the record, this is very extra special to me because you are my brother.
I am. That's true.
So we're going to have a really great conversation. And I really look forward to this. So thanks for this. I look forward to having our conversation and sharing it with the Acknowledge to Action audience.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Can't wait. Let's do it.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it. Well, you've known me since day one, literally from day one, since I was born. So we got a lot of great history. But you also know the history I have with doing some podcasts, and I want to start off by acknowledging how you helped me and inspired me to do the Veteran Power Hour. You gave me some great feedback as far when I was doing that at the community college, and how I transitioned into this podcast now, the Acknowledge to Action podcast. And here we are, finally on camera and getting you on there because I know you have an amazing story. Obviously, I have a lot of access to the behind the scenes stuff, but I'm really looking forward to putting this on a podcast format because it really is important.
Awesome.
I'm gonna kick it off. This is my opening ended question for all the guests on Acknowledge to Action. Can you take us through your military journey from the moment you became involved with the military to where you are today? Highlight some key moments, challenges, and transformations along the way.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So born and raised in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Pretty proud of that. Graduated high school in 1991. I knew at that time I wasn't disciplined enough to go to college, and I knew at that time I wasn't willing to work a minimum wage job for the rest of my life. So I had decisions to make, and I was, I looked at the Army, I looked at the Navy, and decided to go in the Air Force. And I figured I'd do 4 years, and I figured out what I want to do in life. Kind of was leaning towards a state trooper in Pennsylvania, and I was, maybe I'll do 4 years in the military, get out and be a state trooper. So I joined the Air Force, ended up in Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, as back then what was called a security police, but nowadays they're called security forces. I'm basically, essentially, military policeman, and I was enjoying life down there, and my plan was still going according to plan. I was going to do a couple of years and get out and come home, and then I was fortunate enough to deploy a couple of times in my first 4 years. So my first deployment was to Cobalt Towers in Saudi Arabia. And then later I got to deploy to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, when there was a coup down there. And because of those two deployments in my first 4 years, I realized that I did not want to get out. This is what I wanted to do. I enjoyed being in the military. I enjoyed deploying. I enjoyed every aspect about it for the most part. So I decided to stay in after 4 years and ended up doing 26 total years, 10 different assignments. Not quite sure how many deployments, but there was a couple in there. And ended up retiring as Chief Master Sergeant. My last job in the Air Force I was the senior enlisted guy at Al Jaber Air Base in Kuwait. And that was a phenomenal job. It was a wonderful way to go out. And did a lot of jobs in between, from Charleston to Al Jaber and everything between. Halfway through my career, I transitioned out of being a security forces guy and did lots of different jobs. And what that did for me was it made me kind of the jack of all trades and the master of none. But I kind of liked how my journey went. And it was a wonderful career that I look back on fondly every single day. So that's kind of my journey as an Air Force guy.
Well, I believe there's more amazing experiences there as we pull back the layers, because 26 years is an amazing um, is an amazing journey. And 4 years is a testament to somebody's service to the country. But 26 years, that's a whole nother level. And you mentioned how you had 10 duty assignments, multiple TDYs, multiple deployments. Uh, I I this not a tough question, but it's like, wow, what was your favorite assignment? And you mentioned how you were at Al Jaber, which is in Kuwait. It was a fighter wing base, and that's how you capped off your amazing career, right? What would you say though? Can you talk about some of the other assignments you had that had a profound impact on you? As far as, this was my favorite duty station where I lived. Where what was a TDY? Talk about some of the TDY. Talk a little bit about like the difference between like a TDY and a deployment, and some of your duty stations, and the takeaway you got from that.
Sure, sure. So my duty stations were, again, I had 10 of them. 9 of them were pretty amazing. That 10th one was North Dakota. It was nice, but I don't have a whole lot of great things to say about North
Yeah.
Dakota. But I spent 3 different assignments in Alaska, which is beautiful and amazing. Living in Alaska is phenomenal. Spent a couple tours in Europe, in Germany and England. I spent some time in Korea. Let's see, we went from stateside bases would be Charleston, Colorado Springs, where else? Patrick Air Force Base, Florida. Then I was up in Grand Forks, North Dakota as well. So those are the places I actually got to live, bring my family and set up a household and enjoy life there. So as far as places I was stationed, Germany was phenomenal. It was amazing to have a conversation with your family on a Thursday night and say, hey, let's go to Paris tomorrow. So the next morning you get on a train and 2 hours later you're in Paris, or you're in Prague, or you're in Rome. So the benefits of being in the military and living overseas alone, the travel was phenomenal. And if I could have done my entire career overseas, I absolutely would have, just because it's different. I love being in places that are different, because you get to see different people, how they think, their religions, what they eat, like just everything. It's neat to see that you can travel all over the world and everything is just a little bit different than the next. My deployments, well, TDY, you asked the difference between TDYs and deployments. So TDYs are essentially temporary duty. It could be for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. Mostly it's training or conferences, or maybe just going to assist at another base for a couple of weeks. And deployments are more long-term, operational based excursions, but deployments they're just deployments. You deploy and then you go support an operation, whether it be in the Middle East or in Asia. And I was lucky enough to do a handful of deployments in the Middle East and in Asia, and they were all pretty great in their own way. When you go to these different countries, you get to not only see how they live, but you get to appreciate more how you live, how you get to grow up, and the opportunities you have, as opposed to the opportunities they may or may not have in other countries. And, but I love deploying. I can't say that enough. You're a load master, and a lot of my deployments involve C-130s, as you're very familiar with. And there's just something special about landing in jungles in Cambodia, or in war zones in the south. It's exciting, and it's neat to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself. I know you hear people say that all the time, but to be a team member and accomplish the things that we got to do as a military and just play a small part was very rewarding. And I've been out of the military now 6 years. Been out 6 years, but I miss it, and I miss those sort of things. It's just I miss the excitement. the adrenaline, working with teams. But my journey did lead me back to the military. I got out in 2018 and I went to the civilian world, and I was very fortunate to work for a great company. But I found myself missing things, and felt I wanted more. I wanted to make a different sort of impact. So although I got out 6 years ago and worked in the civilian sector for several years and enjoyed it, I ultimately found myself back with the military. So now I'm a Department of the Air Force civilian who
Okay.
works for the Space Force. So, and what I like most about that is I'm back around airmen and now Guardians, Space Force Guardians, and I like being around military. That's what I know. That's what I'm comfortable with, and that's where I like to try to make my impact anywhere I
Yeah.
can.
Wow. There's a lot of takeaway from that, and you sharing that and talking about your journey. You've acknowledged a lot of different things on a lot of different levels and took action on it. How you saw fit based off experience, based off training, based off everything. I'd like to go back because I'm a little biased, and yes, I love the C-130. And when I hear individuals' experiences on when they talk about it, it just it's a great talking point for me. And I like talking about it. And so you mentioned you started off in the Air Force, and it was at the time it was uh, it's now security forces,
I'm
but it was
dating myself, but it was security police. So I came in '92. About
yeah.
'97, I think, is when they changed the name to security forces.
I've heard, again, this is just in passing water cooler talk, but they're talking about um changing it again. I don't know how true that is, but that's besides the point as far as like name. But it does speak to all the change. I spoke to a guest a couple of weeks ago, and we inventoried all the change. This particular individual, well, by the time you're listening to this, it's Chris Hernandez. He was on a previous episode. Good friend of mine, went to high school. We graduated 97, Liberty High School, Bethlehem. So all that. But we inventoried all the change we experienced from 1997 to current. He did 24 years in the Navy, and we just talked about this. And this is just our point of view is we arguably experienced some of the most significant change from the late 90s until current. You went in 92, right? Yeah. So you're in that same exact. In fact, you were on the front end of that change, where I was more in that middle end, 97. There was no emails in 92.
No,
There's no
Holy Joe.
self.
I don't know if you remember Holy Joe's, but I'm really dating myself now. But yeah, I came in before the internet, before email,
Yeah.
before all of that. And although it doesn't seem that long ago, apparently it was. But yeah, lots have changed. But that's the one thing that's consistent about
Mm.
the military for sure is change. Nothing stays the same. You have to adapt. Each year you have to do something a little bit different than the last to keep up with the Joneses. So,
Oh, absolutely. By the time everyone's done listening to this podcast, a lot of things will have changed.
yeah.
Maybe significantly, maybe not so much. But in all seriousness, what we were talking about is if you inventory, say, from 1990, let's go with 1990 to 2020, there is a lot. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not, all that stuff. But if you did and compared, what was that 1990? Was that 30 years, right? I'm not a sociologist, and I'm not a mathematician. So 30 years, right? If you took those 30 years and inventoried all the change through technology, through adaptation, I I would say I'd be hard pressed if you did, say, from 1950 to 1980. There was change, but like as far as like the technology thing piece goes, it's just something that came up. And to your point, how in the military, regardless of what era you served, that's all you dealt with was change and adaptation and all that. So, but I'd like to go back to the scene. How did you talk about your experience? Because I know you had a really cool special, I don't know if I'm calling it right, but a special duty assignment that went beyond security police and security forces. You went on to be a Raven and I believe that's what led you on to the C-130. But what led you to that? I imagine some really amazing opportunities and experiences on the C-130. Okay, can you talk a little bit about that?
So the Raven teams essentially are sent downrange to provide security again for aircraft. So I got to go to a lot of great countries to provide security, and again, most of my flying was out of Japan in support of missions in Asia. So one example is there's something called repat teams and repatriation teams, and what they do is they get intel. For example, that there's POW remains or aircraft remains in Cambodia or Laos or Vietnam that are still there. And of course, as a U.S. military, we want to bring everyone and everything home. So what we would do is, if we received intel as to where some of these sites may be, we would fly a repat team into these countries. And my goodness, was that exciting, because, in the military, the flight lines there's rules, and there's lights, and there's runways, and there's like in those countries, there's just dirt roads you land on it in middle of jungles. And it's fun when you land on a dirt runway in Cambodia, and like within a couple minutes you drop the back and there's kids on cows and scooters chasing you right behind the aircraft. But at the end of the day, we would take these repat teams and we would provide we would bring them to a security team, a pre-established security team that was local nationals. And, they'd have AK-47s and bandanas and cigarettes wrapped around their mouth, and they were militias. And we would give them like 30 grand in cash and say, hey, take these people here and let them do their thing. And we'll come back and we'll meet you here in 1 week, and we'll give you like another $30,000. And that's what they did. And they would go out there and collect whatever they needed to collect, and we'd go back and scoop them up in a week. And it was fun. That was just kind of one example of one of the missions I got to go on quite frequently. But overall, just flying to different countries, to places I've never been, and helping out where I can.
No. So that sounds like a pretty amazing experience. I'm going to ask you a fun question here. Who was the coolest, most fun aircrew member of the C-130 taking you to those places? I think you're looking at one right here.
Well, yeah, no, I want to say you, but I've never flown with you.
No, the Loadmaster is the coolest of aircrew members.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like to your point, like my son joined the military many years ago as well, and I tried to be a good mentor to him and say, hey, you could look at this sort of career field, you could look at this sort of career field. But I go, the Loadmaster, man, that's where it's at, because as you could probably pick up on, I love traveling, and Loadmasters get to do a lot of that, as you know way more than me. So not only were you a Loadmaster, or are a Loadmaster, I should say, for the many decades that you've been doing it, but my son and your nephew, he was a C-17 Loadmaster. I'm not sure if they're as cool as C-130 Loadmasters, but he was a Loadmaster as well, and he flew for 6 years, and he flew 330 days a year for 6 years. So he got to go a lot of great places. So yeah, no, Loadmasters are for sure the coolest people. The second coolest people behind the Ravens.
Yeah. That's what I was getting at. Like it's I had to give the C-130 community a shout out, and a shout out to Seth too. C-17. The C-130 arguably is the coolest fixed wing aircraft in all of DoD. It does. I know technically the C-17 could land on a dirt runway and all that other stuff, but the C-130 is going to take the lead on that stuff, and it does some cool stuff. So
C-130 for sure is the workhorse. And there's no ones. The C-17s, they take them to fancy bases like Ramstein or here and there, and then the C-130s come and they pick it up and they take them into the dangerous spots down. The C-130s are. And they've been around for I don't know how long, but 70 plus years.
I think they were operational in Vietnam, is where they really started their that's where their legacy started. With the A models and all that, and they've been going strong ever since, and they're going to be going strong for quite some time. We're in the J model, era and all that too, doing some cool stuff. But yeah, I'd like to ask you. So that sounds like really cool. I mean, we could talk a lot about all the different opportunities where you being a Raven took you, right? But I'd like to ask you how you found that opportunity, because that's not. I'm not sure how common that is in the security forces world, and how many security forces go on to become Ravens, and whatnot. So how did you acknowledge that? What was that an opportunity that leadership saw in you and say, "Hey, Josh, Airman Drake, um, I think this would be a great interest," or is this something you identified and it was a line of sight opportunity?
Well, I imagine the career field's been around for a little while. Not the career field, but security forces have been around for a little while now. But back in the day, in my time, you had to be in the right place at the right time.
Okay.
Essentially, because if you run at a flying base, there's probably not a whole lot of need for Ravens because you're not flying anywhere or going anywhere. So you kind of have to be at the right base. And then, fortunately, we didn't actually have a Raven. I was in Alaska at the time. I was at Elmendorf, and we actually didn't have a Raven program, but we had a new commander who just came in who happened to be a Raven, and he was a big advocate of the Raven program. So he had some connections at the school, so he got to send a couple of us to the school. And then most of our missions were not out of Alaska. We would fly, again, to Japan and support those folks at Kadena and Yokota, and we would fly missions for them out of Japan, mostly throughout Asia. But yeah, it's kind of a selection process. You have to pass. Back in the day, it was the Army PT test, which was I don't want to give the Army too much credit, but a little bit tougher than the Air Force PT test. So we had to do that.
That's a fair statement.
That's why they mad at us and don't like us, because it's harder. But yeah, no. Again, just right place, right time. The commander was trying to send people there. I was selected to be one of those guys, and got to go to that school. And again, I had a lot of great jobs in the military, but that was one of them because it combined a little bit of everything, but the travel and the deployments and just going to places that most people never get to go, to me was super exciting.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And going back a little bit to, you started off by saying in high school, you acknowledge and identify, hey, I'm not ready for college. And I was the same way, exactly the same way. I knew I had to do something that didn't involve college, and I wasn't ready for that 9 to 5 minimum wage. I worked my way up, right? So I absolutely understand that and appreciate that. I also, too, with identifying, you made the choice for the Air Force, right? But you did your due diligence as far as talking to other services. So
I sure did, yes.
how did you come to terms? Was I say this is for me. Well, you were a big influence. Absolutely. I want to acknowledge that. That was my brother's in, and yeah, I don't remember our conversation back when I was thinking about it, but it was a conversation we had. But also, too, it was a line of sight. And I think it was the last recruiter I talked to as well. So between great family influence, but also, too, in the line of sight and where the recruiter was, I was like, all right, yeah, I'll go to the Air Force. But how did you come to terms with the Air Force and your decision for that versus the other branches of service?
So I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, so my memory isn't the greatest. But I will tell you, there was a gentleman. This is before email, before cell phones, before all of that. There was this gentleman by the name of Sergeant Nettles, and he was an Army recruiter. And one day, that dude called me at my best friend's house on the phone, like, hey, is Josh there? Pick up the phone. My friend's house, not at my house, my friend's house.
And we're talking about landline phones where you actually had to physically get up. It was still attached to the wall.
Yeah. I'm like, why is this Army recruiter calling me at my best friend's house? And anyways, hey, Sergeant Nettles, why don't you come down and talk about joining the Army? I was like, no. I don't want to join the Army. But he said the magic words, like, hey, I'll get you out of school. I was like, oh, sold. When do you want me there? So he was like, you write me a pass, get out of school. Like, hey, come join the Army. And anyway, the guy called me nonstop, morning, noon, and night. And anyway, it was just off-putting. Like, I mean, it was just like it was overwhelming that the guy was just like pushing me and pushing me. And he ended up convincing me to go to MEPS, and they're literally screaming and yelling at you in MEPS. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm not even in the military yet, and they're screaming at me. I was like, so I didn't get a great vibe about the whole process for the Army, and I have ultimate respect for the people who join the Army and are in the Army, but I just knew it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And then I went to the Navy. And again, I was focused on law enforcement, and I was like, hey, I want to be a military policeman. And at the time, I don't know what it is now, but it was called a Master at Arms in the Navy. And like, well, you have to be in the Navy for a couple of years. I think it was 2 before you could become a Master at Arms. What am I going to do for 2 years before I could even be eligible for my? So I didn't decide to go. I decided not to go with the Navy, and then I was like, one day, let me just go talk to the Air Force recruiter. And it was kind of a different approach, They weren't bugging me. They weren't chasing me. They were just saying, hey, this is what we have to offer. If you want to go forward with it, I need this, this, and this from you. They made me work for it as opposed to them kind of chasing me down. And for whatever reason, that works. And again, I thought I'd just do 4 years. If there was an airman getting out after 4 years, it was me. Because, when you first come in, it's not fun. You got basic training, you got tech school. And back then, that was a lot. And working long hours, we worked 14 hours a shift most nights. And so it was tough. But over time, it got better. And I appreciate how tough it was because it laid the foundation and groundwork for the rest of my life. I was like, if I could do this stuff and be successful at it, then there's nothing I can't do, moving forward, working a 9 to 5, 8 hours. Well, that's kind of easy when you're used to working 13, 14 hours a night. So I appreciate how hard it was because it kind of made things moving forward a little bit easier. So again, I enjoyed doing it and stayed in for a while.
There's some incredible value as far as you being able to identify. So you're 17, 18 years old as a senior, knowing you wanted to do something right, and you identified the military as the way to do that. But you even took it up a next level notch and said, I want to do something law enforcement related. And you use that as a baseline and a tool to evaluate. So you could, you acknowledge what you needed to do and you accepted that, right? The components of acknowledge to action are acknowledge, accept, process, plan, action, right? That's just kind of my technique and strategy to go through the motions of making decisions and taking action, right? And you did that. And I don't think a 17, 18-year-old is like, all right, time for acknowledge to action time. But in hindsight, as we get older and more experienced, we kind of package it up in that sort of description. This is what I did. I acknowledged that, but going back, and I believe that's what leads to being a good leader, mentorship, us being able to share our experiences and empower others in similar situations, when they're 17, 18. But my point in sharing that and saying that is there's something to be said. And I don't know if there's a magic recipe or I don't know what the key to identifying what you want and need to do in the moment at a particular moment in time and in a chapter in our life. And you did that when you were 17, 18, senior in high school, military, law enforcement, and the rest is, for lack of better terms, history. And then 26 years later, it led you to all these other amazing opportunities. 10 duty assignments, multiple TDYs, these experiences that we're just skimming the surface on. And I know we're doing some edits here, but it's not. It takes a practice to share our journey and talk about and reflect on it. But it's so important just from a individual for our own awareness, but also to share our stories and whatnot. So that I'm acknowledging and highlighting the value in hearing that, because if there's a 17, 18-year-old listening and things are lost in translation, it's all right. It's all right. Just know that just get yourself on a path and a trajectory, and it's going to lead to other opportunities, whether it's military, whether and that's just not just military; it's just beyond. But um, I'm like a human pinball. I'm all over the place. I'm like a runaway train. I'll get back to to the significance and value of how you've acknowledged that, and arguably how you empowered yourself and went through those that path to lead you to what you wanted to accomplish, right? Um, what is what was your most favorite assignment, whether it was a permanent duty station, a TDY, like what was your most favorable, most enjoyable I know that's tough because there's so many. It's somewhat of an unfair question, but just for the sake of trying to, highlight one or two, what would you say? Because then I have a counter question to that after that.
Yeah, sure. Again, I love being overseas, so I kind of have to acknowledge a little bit of all those places. Alaska was phenomenal. I mean, Alaska is Alaska. I mean, when you close your eyes and think of Alaska, that's it. It's big mountains and snow and moose and bear, and it's kind of cool. Growing up where we grew up to, one cool thing we didn't talk about is, when I was stationed in Alaska, your first assignment was in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is kind of the middle of nowhere, Alaska. And
Yeah.
coincidentally, I was 100 miles down the road from you. So we're two guys from Bethlehem living in the middle of Alaska. I'll always think that was pretty cool. But
That was on a remote. You were on a remote tour, right? At Clear Air Station,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I was down at Clear, which is it's a radar base in literally the middle of nowhere.
And that was a 1 year. That was a 1 year
For
controlled
1 year,
assignment,
yeah,
right?
you go by yourself, you do your thing, and then you go home. And then, so my family was down in Anchorage, and then I was about 300 miles north up the road from them at Clear.
Okay.
And then you were 100 miles north of me, so we'd hang out on the weekends sometimes. So I
That
thought
was
that was pretty awesome. That was pretty neat.
yeah.
But going back to the assignments, England was phenomenal. We lived in an English village. My son went to British schools. He even had a British accent as a little kid, which was really neat.
Yeah.
Germany was amazing. Yeah, it was all good. It was all good. Even North Dakota, like I said, North Dakota wasn't a fun place to be, but at the end of the day, you still had the base, you still had the airmen around you, and it was a great mission and great family. But yeah, I still look back on all. I'm an optimistic dude. I look back on everywhere. I try to remember all the positives about the places, but cause I hate talking about myself. But yeah. So I'm sorry, I kind of tailed off on North Dakota.
That's okay. No, that's I like hearing it. I mean, I can't speak for all listeners, but that's what this is about. Just hearing the journey, because there's so many behind the scenes. There's so many intangibles that everyday communications don't account for, and all that. So that's what I like about this. An hour-ish time frame covers so much. So it's tough because as I inventory things and all that, there's a lot to share and unpack. I want to ask you one more experience question, and then we're transitioning into transition from the military, right? So you had a lot of great experiences in overseas, and I absolutely acknowledge that and appreciate that, because I've had similar experience being overseas, being in diverse and unique and unique environments does something to you. It just helps your perspective. It helps reflect on who you are as an individual. It challenges you in ways that are unexpected, and you learn from it. And there's a lot of value and takeaway to that. And that happened. There's one thing about the military, I'll say, that I don't know if it's by design or by how it evolved over the years, right? When I say the years, decades, centuries, even. Every around 3 to 4 years, change is coming. And yeah, you may have had a general idea of where you're going next and whatnot, but what's your thoughts on that? Is that like by design? Like, are every 3 to 4 years we're going to move service members to a different duty station? Is that because of logistics, the need, or is that by design to force shape? I know the Air Force likes to use the force develop, or professional military education. What's your thoughts on that as far as you know being moved every 3 or 4 years, generally speaking?
Yeah, so on the active duty side, that's kind of what we do, and I believe the kind of sole purpose behind that is because let's just start at the top. You got a commander that comes in, and he or she is really good at one thing, and then they highlight that, and they grow that, and they foster that, and they do wonderful things in that squadron. But maybe there's other things that they don't want to build. I think it's called kingdom building. They don't want the same people in the same spots
Mm.
forever, because then that squadron kind of tends to take the shape of that person or those people, and that could be a good or it could be a bad thing. But if you keep cycling people through, this person's good at this, then the next person's good at this, and then you kind of stay more focused on the mission and doing what's man, that's a tough question, man.
Yeah.
It's to prevent people like growing roots and just making it more theirs. Like, I don't know, that's a tough question, man. For
No, you're not. And I think this speaks to the dynamic of the challenges that sometimes we covertly experience as a service member. Especially in the active duty sector, right? And even in the reserves and the National Guard, right? We have to be challenged. I don't think people wake up as like, I welcome a good challenge today. I know some people may like broadcast that on, in the different outlets, but generally speaking, we need to be challenged, and I think that's where we grow. And I think that's what you're speaking to, as far as like when there's a false sense of security when we get too comfortable. And I think if we're in the same place, in the same position for X amount of time, especially in a leadership position, there tends to be a false sense of security or misplaced intent as a result. And that's kind of that's my thoughts to it. And what I'm hearing you're saying, it's like every 3 to 4 years, we have to be challenged, whether we ask for it or want it or not. Because who doesn't want to be comfortable? Like there's some duty stations that people love and just would just kill for, not literally. And that's fine. When you get too comfortable in one particular spot, when you start feeling comfortable, that's probably when we need to be challenged, so we become better leaders. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that here now. Is we have to be challenged as leaders to get out of our comfort zone. And I believe that's what the every 3 to 4 years, we're taking you from this squadron or this location and putting you somewhere new. Now go be a better leader, go or learn, adapt, and adjust.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, going back to that, like, you come in for a couple of years, you give what you got. We always talk about making something better than you found it. Leaving something better than you found it. You come in, you do a couple of years, and you give everything you got to that squadron, that unit, and then you move on. One beautiful thing about being in the military is, and I imagine anybody across the service could hopefully agree to this, is like, we don't have to know each other. We maybe, a lot of us have never met when we work with each other for the first time, but you could take 500 service members that are active duty right now, put them in the middle of the desert, and tell them to build a city and a runway. And although they've never met before, they're going to land on the ground. They're going to know their roles, and they are just going to do it. And it's amazing to see the way that the military is designed. We're interchangeable. And that's for a reason, just as that. So you could just pack us up, send us over there, give us the mission, and we'll get it done. Because typically there's no failure in what we do. So yeah, you come in, you give them some time, and then you move on and do better things. Plus, a lot of times, if you're successful in doing what you're doing, and you're blooming where you planted, you outgrow that position. and you get
Yeah.
promoted. So again, you could be in an E7 position and you did great things at a E7. Then guess what? You made E8 because you did such great things. And then you have to go to a base that has a position for you and a place where you could do further great things. So there's a lot of things that go into moving every couple of years, but I for one loved it. I thought it was great. It
Yeah.
was neat because you got to go to a place for a couple of years and hang out and do great things. And then next couple of years you're on the other side of the world. And actually, I thought that was going to be a struggle for me when I got out because when you spend your whole entire adult life moving every couple of years, you get used to it. And I enjoyed it. My wife, that's all she did her entire life. Her father was Navy, and she moved every 4 years her entire life till a
Yeah.
couple years ago. And so we thought once we got out of the military and actually had to live somewhere for maybe forever, it was almost daunting. I was like, wow, that's going to be strange to live in the same spot.
It was uncharted territory.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know if I'm going to, we ended up retiring in Florida, and we're here primarily because my daughter's in high school and I just want to keep her going through high school and not mess with that. But once she graduates high school, we maybe might move again just because to go somewhere else and do something different.
That's interesting, and I've been, obviously we've known each other a long time, way beyond the military service years, but for the last 20 plus years, that's all we've known in our own unique experiences. And as far as like moving and taking on new opportunity every 3 to 4 years, and you become conditioned to it and you welcome it, and it is exciting. I know for me too, it's like, wow, like I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out, but I'm excited. I'm well, one of my favorite movies, and you probably know this, growing up, was like the Goonies, the sense of adventure. Like, look, I don't know where this tunnel is going to take us, but let's do it. The closest professional opportunity to do that is in the military. So, but I want to, in the spirit of acknowledge to action, I want to acknowledge how you pre-forecasted how that potentially could be a challenge for you. As far as like, all right, I'm approaching retirement, I'm retired. Okay, I know I got 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, to be in a, we'll call it like a static, stationary position or opportunity. But here you are embracing it, and making it work for you, and managing your transition really well. So what key factors, I guess, have factored into that's helped you manage that? Because that is tough. I hear that often, and I recognize that as well. It's like, man, 5 years from now, am I going to be in the same position? Even though you've been in the military 26 years, you may have only been in a relative position for maybe no more than, and I'm generalizing here, without 3 years max, right? Before you moved on and did something different, right? And that's in the civilian world, that's not nowhere near as common, nowhere near. And it's rare, actually. So what factored into helping you manage that transition where you're at, and helped you manage your well-being across the board? 'Cause transition's tough, whether it's a 4-year, a 4-year enlistment or a 26-year retirement.
Well, we talked about earlier, like one thing that's consistent about the military is change. So I mean,
Yeah.
just one thing you get comfortable with is change, and a lot of things. The military has taught me a lot of things. Now I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for the military. It's given me so many things, but I hope it's given me the ability to communicate. Starting out as a law enforcement guy, you have to write police reports, so you have to be very particular about how you communicate. And then, of course, in any military, you stay in long enough, you go to leadership courses, and they teach you further how to communicate. And I think one of the most important things in life, whether it be in the military or civilian world, at home, you pick the place, is communication. You have to be able to unemotionally communicate with people and let them know where you're coming from and who you're about and who you are. And I think if you have the ability to communicate, and if you have the ability to be genuine, and if you have the ability and if you have the ability to show people that you care, One thing about being in the military that taught me is team. It's all about team. It's you're only as strong as your weakest link. I know that's cliche, but it's absolutely true. So you have to take care of each other, and you have to be there for each other, because at the end of the day, you want to be successful, and you're on a team. It's not about you; it's about your team, and you just need to be successful. So you have to have the ability to communicate. So having the ability to communicate and relay things that are important to you and understand things that are presented to you is something that helped me transition, because I ended up I wasn't actually trying to get out of the military. I was pretty happy doing what I was doing, but I was fortunate enough to be offered a job with a computer software company, and they convinced me to join the company. I'm so happy I did, because it was a beautiful transition. Because for years, especially on the active duty side, I imagine most people are like, what the heck am I going to do when I get out? And
Yeah.
I was kind of led the water a little bit, and I was in a good spot, right place, right time again. A lot of things in
I
life.
was just thinking that. I was waiting to plug that in. Right place, right time.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
that's what's about. Good luck. But
I
yes,
think that's the name of our title. Right place, right time with a little bit of
yeah,
luck.
yeah, absolutely. Bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I was fortunate enough to be hired onto this job, which made my transition super easy, because I didn't have to move my house. I didn't have to do anything except kind of take off the uniform, and I'm in Florida, so put on the shorts and a t-shirt and go to work. So is an easy transition for me as far as finding employment. Now, one thing that I appreciated everything about being in the civilian sector. There was so many good things about it. But again, I missed the military, and I felt I wanted to make my impact more in that environment than in a
Yeah.
software environment. But yeah, transitions are, I guess they could be difficult, but I don't look at them as difficult. I look at them as, like as you said earlier, it's exciting. What's next? What's down the end of the
Yeah.
tunnel? What's my next chapter? And so transition, I don't think anybody should be afraid of, because everything changes. If you should never be afraid of change, you should embrace it and be excited for it. So
Yeah. No, that's great. That absolutely speaks to the ethos of acknowledge to action. And that and it's a mindset. It's a mindset. If we could remind ourselves of that, it makes things a little bit more manageable. It doesn't make it easy. Like change is not easy and that's not how I'm processing it. And I know that's not what you're suggesting, but it's like you have to embrace change. You have to acknowledge it so you can manage it, or it's going to manage you. And if you take a forward proactive approach to it, then the ball's in your court more often than not. Again, that's just in my opinion, in my experience, and hearing your experiences and having you share it the way you are gives people insight and tools to put in their I call it a life hack toolbox, right? Like, hey, it's not a matter if, it's a matter of when. But start forecasting that now. Again, we don't have the magic recipe or do a rinse and repeat. Hey, what worked for me is going to be a little bit different for you, but the general sense is there. And I'm going to say this because there's a couple more things I want to add to that, because everything you're saying is as I'm processing the moment is incredibly valuable. And there's a lot more we could talk about. We could talk about what TAPS is, Transition Assistant Program. I forget what the S stands for, but that is just, and I've heard this in my experience coming off active duty before I transitioned to the Guard. That was just a check in the box, like an output. Like, yep, you went through TAPS. Good luck. Here's your DD 214. Take care. Right. That's, and I'm not taking away from what DoD has done over the years to make it better, but there's a lot of room for improvement to help service members transition, whether it's from a 4-year enlistment, commitment, all that, all the way up to a 26-year retirement, right? And what you're saying is acknowledge change, embrace it, because you did it once. If you did it once in the military, there's something there to be able to you identify like, hey, I know this is going to lead me down a path. I'm not sure it's going to take me. You did it once before, you could do it again, but in a different sort of way. You have to do it with a different mindset. It's not as structured, like you said, at MEPS. I want to mention too, a reoccurring theme in all the episodes of the Acknowledge to Action have been MEPS, but post-military MEPS. And that's the focus of our well-being to help a transition. The post-military MEPS is mental, emotional, physical, social, spiritual well-being. And as I reflect on my own transition, having talked to a number of veterans over the years, that's so important for us to keep in mind. Some of us need to focus at the certain points in our life. I need to focus on my physical well-being because for XYZ reasons. I need to focus on my mental and emotional piece. Okay, there's VA and services out there to help with that. But it all absolutely starts with the knowledge. And I feel very strongly about this. That doesn't start until you acknowledge. And going back to the C-130 air crew operational world, acknowledge is the most powerful and significant term we say in our operational checklist. Acknowledge loadmaster, acknowledge pilot, all the crew members. And then you proceed into your operational checklist, whatever that may be. After takeoff checks, before landing, combat entry, you name it. I've probably said acknowledge, I know I have, thousands of times through running hundreds of checklists over the years, right? So that is just something the takeaway that I'm hearing you saying is embrace the change, acknowledge it, and work with it. Work with it and set yourself up for those challenges that you are going to experience, but in a way that helps you take action how you see fit and all that. So that was a lot I just said. I just want to put the ball back in your court and hear your thoughts on that. And what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, no. So yeah, absolutely. You got to acknowledge whatever's in front of you and figure out how to defeat it or get around it or conquer it or however you want to do with it. But not all change is fun. Not all change is good. Not all change is easy. And I will tell you, I've had some times in my life that it just wasn't fun. I've had some folks in my life that were, my leaders and my supervisors. There was a couple, just a few, that were horrific. And they were really, really hard to deal with because they were my superiors. And but I wouldn't change it for the world. Because I learned how to deal with people like that. Because we're not always going to have people in our lives that are easy to deal with. We're not always going to have leaders, supervisors, managers in our life that we look up to. But we have to live with them and we have to still be on their team and figure out how to interact and be successful. But I look back at some of my hardest changes in life as the best because it's prepared me for, who I got to be today. Hard times, I've heard this before and I don't know if I'm quoting it correctly, but hard times create hard men and soft times create soft men. And sometimes, it's if you need some challenges and it needs to be hard because you need to be able to have that ability to know if you're presented a situation, you'll have the confidence and the ability and the tools to be successful. So not everything is a fun time, but it makes us who we are today. How did you deal with that? Like, did you crumble up and fail? Or did you man up and figure out how to move through it? But those who figure out how to navigate it and acknowledge it, that's the keys to success in life. Whether it be in the military or working for Apple, it's everyone's gonna be challenged, and if you're not being challenged, then what are you doing? Are you happy? Are you successful? If you are, I'm happy for you. But
spot on, because that's how I feel too. It's like when we get comfortable, there's a false sense of security with that, and we need to be challenged, and even from going to the gym, you challenge those muscles. It makes you stronger. You don't get stronger by just sitting around, right? Physically, you just don't. I mean, it's not physically possible. But socially, mentally, emotionally too, we have to be challenged in those ways, and because there are times where we fall on our face and we quote unquote like fail, but that's where we learn. That's what was the other F word you said? Fail, but that's where you find a way to not fail next time, to be successful. That mindset. Let me flip the verbiage mindset here. When you fail, then you find a way to be successful next time, right? And I believe that that's what it's about. When through these conversations, through self-awareness, self-analysis, being challenged, welcoming challenge. And some people, of course, when they ask to be challenged, they're more receptive to it. But there are challenges in our life where it's not anticipated, and at first it's like it's a punch in the face. But it's like, all right, how do I not get punched in the face next time? You can anticipate things like that, and you become better, and almost take like a again, I'm no martial arts expert, but you take a Tai Chi approach instead of a headbutting. There are times where we gotta face it and lock horns, and there's other times where we gotta take a Tai Chi approach. I'm saying across the board when it comes to challenges, intrapersonally, even with ourselves too. So whether we're dealing with transition, identifying that next chapter in our life, setting those goals, and all that too. So you touched upon a lot today, and I do want to, this. I know this because we've talked about it numerous times, even before this podcast became a thing. But you're always welcome here. I want this to be the start of many conversations that we could have to share with others. So, Travis and Jason Kells, if you're listening, look out, because you got two brothers who know how to podcast.
We're coming for you.
And you know what, Jason, I'm not that far from you. I'm a couple miles away. I'm about 10, 15 miles. So we could have a conversation. All right.
Hey,
but
shout out to Jason Kelsey. I love that man.
I love it. Yeah. No, for tips.
10 beer down on the Jersey Shore just for the hell of it, just like he does. That guy gets it. So yeah, if we could even get close to that, we'll be more than successful in life.
It would be great if somehow they find this and listen to it and give us some good feedback, and make this a joint teamwork effort, right? I know we were going to talk a little bit about leadership, but that's going to be round two. So Josh, because we just skimmed the surface on a lot of different things today, and I'm excited to pick up where we're leaving off as far as like what that next topic in that conversation is, because leadership, we could have hours of conversation just about that. What it mean, how you define it, how you've adapted to it, and how you went on to be a chief master sergeant in the Air Force, and how you applied that, how you demonstrate that, and empowered others to follow your lead and build them up. That I'm just planting the seed for that.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right there. Like you don't get to the top by yourself. You hear that all the time. Like empowering others, and again, going back to that teamwork. That's how you're successful in life, because it's never, especially in the military, it's never just about you. It's about the team you're on, and sometimes you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, and oftentimes I wasn't. If the youngest person in the room had the greatest idea, then hey, that's what we're gonna roll with. So yeah, leadership doesn't always mean you're the smartest guy. It means being able to take the ability to take a team and get promote their strengths and so leadership is fun. It's fun.
It really is. I see it as a mindset. I don't see it as a title. I think, generally speaking, people see leadership followed by a title. Leadership's about a mindset, and it's a philosophy that is so. Anyway, let's plant the seed on that. Let's because you know me, better than most. I'm like a runaway train. Once I get going, it's hard for me to stop, and all that. So I really appreciate this, Josh. I do, not just from a perspective as a guest, but you as my brother, who's over the years we've talked, we've shared, we've supported one another, and this is just another example of that. So. I'm just putting it out there on the World Wide Web for all to hear.
Well, thank you for having me, Matt. It's been it's a wonderful time, and it's extra special, obviously, because we're brothers. So that's pretty
cool. So on a we're building the Acknowledge Action playlist song list, which is getting really good. It's amazing some of the songs that I've been getting, and I really look forward to listening to that on the regular. What song do you want to dedicate to the Acknowledge Action playlist that's available on Spotify?
Oh man, there's so many great songs out there, but I don't even know why I'm going with this one. But life is again, we talked about challenges and adapting, and I'm gonna go with Ozzy Osbourne, "Crazy Train," because I don't know why I came up with that, but it's like it's a great song, first of all. But sometimes you're on a crazy train and you have to figure out how to acknowledge where you're at and figure out how to move forward. So I don't know if it's a great song, but I'm gonna lock in on Ozzy Osbourne, "Crazy Train."
That is a great song. I go, well, maybe because your brother's a little bit of a crazy train. He goes off on tangents.
I had a million songs going through my head, but that's just kind of where I locked it.
I love that. That's a great song. It's an awesome song. I have that on one of my exercise workout songs.
I don't know how inspirational it is, but
well, I'll tell you, it's inspirational now. If it didn't have inspiration prior to this conversation, it definitely does now. So cool. Oh, hey, well, Josh, thanks, man. Until next time, next one will be a joint. I got a couple things in the works where I'm reaching out to other veterans for us to have like a joint sort of podcast, like a live stream. So it could be you, me, Chris, the Navy veteran, Chris Hernandez, who I was talking about before, just for us to have a live stream. So that's just for all of our listeners, that's just in the works. And that will be formally shared out. So you have that access point in the future. So
I look forward to it. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, I'm really, and it's just that live stream will just be an opportunity for people to connect, veterans, military, family members, anybody. It could be anybody. This is not just limited to the military connected, population. That this goes beyond, because we're all interconnected, right? But it'll be an opportunity to ask questions, ask for some insights, share their experiences, ask more. But anyway, more to follow on that. Thank you, Josh. Until next time, I really appreciate you, man.
Been fun, man.
All right.
Out.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode titled Bros for Life. It was a true pleasure to have my brother Josh share his incredible military journey with us. From his initial plan to serve 4 years to an impressive 26-year career. Josh's story is one of embracing change and rising to challenges. We delved into his experiences, the significance of communication and teamwork, and the leadership mindset that has guided him through numerous transitions. As brothers, we've known each other since day one, and it's been amazing to explore how these experiences have shaped Josh's life and career. We hope you found this episode as inspiring and insightful as we did. Stay tuned for more stories of transformation and personal growth. Don't forget to check out our playlist on Spotify, where the songs dedicated from guests symbolize the unwritten journeys we all embrace. Wherever you are on your journey, you are not alone. Until next time, this is Bros for Life on Acknowledge to Action Podcast.